By the early 1990s, there were already franchises that were mainstays on the toy shelf. And you had franchises like G.I. Joe, Real American Hero, The Real Ghostbusters, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Now, while these toy lines were super popular, we were always waiting for the next big thing. So that's what we're going to explore on this episode, are those definitive toy lines of the 1990s. Sit back, relax as we go through 9 of those definitive 90s toy lines. Welcome back, guys. It's Thomas, and on this episode I want to explore some of those toy lines that are mainstays on the toy shelf, or they reinvigorated another toy line, and they all happen to pop up around the 1990s. Now, as mentioned in the intro, you had toy lines like G.I. Joe and Turtles and Ghostbusters. They were popular in the early to mid 90s, but then they were fizzling out. We were always looking for what was next. So what do we have in the 90s that was truly ours as 90s kids? And that's what we're going to explore. First up on this list, we have Beast Wars. Beast Wars show debuted in 1996, and of course, it came out with a whole line of action figures. Now you gotta remember, G1 Transformers, that show ended in 1987, and they tried to revive it without media, but just keeping action figures on the shelves with Gen 2. Unfortunately, that toy line wasn't as successful, so Hasbro had to make a decision: were they going to end it or try to revive it? And the antidote in this case was Beast Wars. If you were a 90s kid like me, then that probably was your first introduction into Transformers. And I remember loving the show. It was one of those first CG animated shows. It was fantastic. You got to see familiar characters: Optimus Primal, not a truck anymore, he's a gorilla, and all the fun supporting characters: Rat Trap, Tarantulas, Cheetor, and Waspinator. So I think Beast Wars is one of those first quintessential 90s lines. Not only does it still resonate today and we're getting new figures of Beast Wars characters, but who knows, it probably is what saved Transformers and helped it from decade to decade. Next, we have Jurassic Park by Kenner in 1993. I've featured Jurassic Park multiple times on the show. We talked about them in iconic 90s playsets, iconic 90s vehicles, and in best dinosaur action figures. But think how far Jurassic Park has come between 1993 and now, not only with the movies, it's in theme parks, and of course, we've gotten some amazing action figures. But it all started in 1993, and not to go super deep into it, we were getting plenty of dinosaur toys just since the beginning of toys, but they made it different. They gave them the official stamp, the JP, they had the dino damage, they had electronic noises and sounds. It was super cool. And while the action figures of the actual humans were not screen accurate, they were still fun as hell. So to see a franchise that was born in the 90s and still continuing to this day with sequels, for better or worse, we're still getting toys from Mattel. It's just super fun to know that we were there at the very beginning in 1993. Next up, we are talking about Kenner's Star Wars Power of the Force 2, and I spent a whole month talking about Star Wars because I've already went over it ad nauseum, but think of the cultural movement at the time. There has not been new Star Wars figures on the shelf for over 10 years, and a lot of kids probably hadn't seen Star Wars at the time, but they were releasing the trilogy back into movie theaters. You were able to get it on VHS, and they released a ton of toys. Vehicles, playsets, creatures, super fun, and all leading up to the new prequels that were coming out in 1999. So what a way to hook another generation into this franchise that you might not have gotten them, and now there's forever Star Wars fans. This next one is cheating because it's just going to wrestling figures as a whole. The 90s started off with amazing wrestling figures with Hasbro's WWF action figures. They were super cool, and they were the beginning of what would end up being years to come of new wrestling figures coming out all the time. So once Hasbro's ended and we were kind of looking for what's next, you had other wrestling companies coming out. Toy Biz started taking on WCW. The original San Francisco Toy Company was taking on ECW. Jakks Pacific now had the license for WWF. We all know what happened at the end of the decade. WWF at the time, now WWE, took over all of those franchises. But The leading up to that point is, I think, what got a lot of people into wrestling. You had different types of toys from all of those different companies, and they were all doing cool stuff. Toy Biz was making WCW figures that were more or less like Marvel toys. The ECW toys were a little short and cartoonish, but they came with awesome accessories, maybe starting that breakaway table and chair type accessory that we would get later on with future wrestling lines. And Jakks Pacific was a far departure from what the original Hasbro's were, because you can actually pose them and do some wrestling moves. And I believe they are what kicked off the wrestling craze that is today. I think wrestling toys are probably more popular than actual wrestling. And we got our first X-Men figures back in 1991, and this is before there was any media, just coming off the popularity of the comic. Once the X-Men, the animated series, came out, we got all tons of figures from the comics, the show. Some characters didn't even make an appearance on the show, but because the comics were so popular, we were getting all these random guys, and it was so fun to actually build an ensemble of characters instead of just having your one main hero. And there was an equal amount of heroes as there were villains, and that made the line so much fun. And that wasn't the only Toy Biz line that endured, because with Spider-Man, the animated series, we got an awesome toy line from 94 to 96. And what other comic book character has an awesome set of rogues other than Spider-Man? There's only one that I can think of, but now you got the main character Spidey with his supporting cast of other characters, but he just has some of the best villains. So to finally get most of those characters into toy form, they matched your X-Men figures. What a great time to be an action figure collector. And as we see today with Marvel Legends, Marvel hasn't slowed down in the toy front, and we are still getting great characters today. And it all starts with some of those early Toy Biz lines. Batman moved over to Kenner. They continued making figures for the movie, but really we got our stride as 90s kids when Batman the Animated Series came out. Now, I think Batman figures had sort of an identity crisis throughout the 90s, because you had movie figures from the Burton movies and they kind of all looked the same, but then when the Batman Forever figures came out and the Batman and Robin figures came out, they were all kind of different. But one line that stayed the same was Batman the Animated Series, and Kenner produced some amazing figures, and they were just fantastic. You had the main line of characters, and other than Spider-Man, Batman has the best rogues gallery, and we got all of those characters. Even when they reinvented the line in 1995 with the New Adventures of Batman and Robin, they all kept the same sort of shape and body type, so your figures from the original cartoon still mixed in with those newer characters, and it was just such a great time to be a Batman fan. So for that, Batman the Animated Series has to go down as one of the most definitive 90s toy lines. I remember the day when I was on the schoolyard and I realized that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were obsolete. Out in the schoolyard, and it was during recess, and this kid brought an 8-inch Green Ranger, and I just remember everyone else had their other toys, but we all flocked to this one kid and were just asking him, what is that? And that was my first introduction to Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. If there's any kind of franchise that caused a phenomenon throughout pop culture and the toy industry, it was Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Bandai gave us some of the most amazing action figures in 1993. Not only did you have those 8-inch dolls that I mentioned, but when they released these smaller scale figures with the auto-morphing heads, those things are fantastic. They're still some of my favorite action figures to this day. And that's not all. We got all the Zords. We got all the space villains. Roleplay items. And this was the first time where I actually saw boys and girls playing the same thing. You had girls that wanted to be Kimberly and Trini on the schoolyard, while I got to be Tommy all the time because that's my name and I love green. And since Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, how many other iterations of the Rangers have we seen? Still going to this day. Playmates just picked up the line and they're doing the Reignition line, which is cool. It's for kids. It's not necessarily my favorite. I think they took the Automorph and made it worse, but there's still Mighty Morphin on the shelf. Power Rangers have endured since the 90s, and we were there for it. Now, I'm putting this one as an honorable mention because I don't think it has the same cultural significance, whereas the others either reinvigorated another line, they've continued to this day and have just evolved. This one kind of lived and died in the 90s, and that goes to Exo Squad. Exo Squad was a toy line produced by Playmates from 1993 to 1996. The animated show was awesome. It was serious, so adults even loved it. Go back and watch it now, it actually has some really serious themes. The toys were just as fantastic. Figures had cool designs, and they were not small enough to mix with your mask figures, but also not big enough to mix with your G.I. Joe figures. They just kind of lived in their own little world, but they came with these awesome mech suits, and the love that they put into these different mech suits and the designs, these were so cool. Unfortunately, they haven't gotten much love since the actual show, but they are a product of the 90s and probably a line that deserves a revamp to introduce to future audiences. And the last on this list of definitive 90s toy lines I have to give to Pokémon. Now, I will say I was young enough to probably get into Pokémon. For some reason, it just didn't resonate with me, but that doesn't mean I didn't recognize what was happening around me with other kids. In 1997, Pokémon really was hitting on all cylinders, from trading cards to video games and toys. Kids were trading packs of Pokemon cards, playing Pokemon on their Nintendo, and I remember the game on 64. As an action figure kid, I was more interested in the toys, and Hasbro did a line of trainers and battle packs where you got either one of the trainers like Misty and Ash, or you got the battle packs that came with a PVC Pokemon figure and a Pokeball. If we think of one of the last big 90s franchises that has continued even now until this day, it has to be Pokemon. While it didn't necessarily own the action figure market, it owned play as a whole. And like I said before, cards, video games, and toys, it just owned the market. And I think one of the last definitive toy lines of the 90s. And what other toy line is making grown-ass men get into full-blown fights at Costco? Alright folks, that does it for this definitive list of 90s toy lines. What do you think should have been on this list? I picked ones that I thought not only were a product of the 90s, but have continued to evolve and grow and exceed into next generations. That's how I picked my list. Let me know down in the comments which ones you would have picked. And until the next episode, we'll catch you next time.